So you might be thinking about doing a legal English exam or a proficiency English exam because you think that this might help you in your legal career. In this video, I'm going to give you my observations, my views on having worked in this field for a number of different years as to should you be investing your energy and your money into passing a legal English or a proficiency English exam. So let's get started. First of all, let me just shrink myself down here into the side before we get started, because I understand that this video is going to be a little bit controversial as regards my views. So there's a few introductory points and caveats that I just want to say. The main assumption for this video is that proficiency exams, or TOLs, which is the legal English exam which is commercially available at the moment, are seen as helpful to getting a job as a lawyer. So that's the main assumption behind this video that I will be answering. Based on my personal experience and practice, having taught legal English since 2009 and having worked with law firms since 2012, I'm going to give you my background on this. So I've been doing this for some time. I've been working with many different people who have been, who thought or think that doing a legal English exam or doing a proficiency exam will help them. So I've got a certain amount of background experience that I can use to answer those questions. As an English language teacher, I am CELTA qualified, and I have taught ILEC, which was the previously commercially available legal English exam, and TOLS, both the old version and the new version. As a matter of fact, just down here, yesterday I was digging around on my shelves and I found my old ILEC book. I've got no idea what I've done with my TOLS book, but I have found my old TOLS advanced exam paper book here, which is the old TOLS exam. I'll do a video maybe later on to describe the difference between the old TOLS and the new TOLS, but needless to say, I've got all the materials here. I've also been involved in law firm recruitment processes. So people have come to me to ask, should we employ this person, or should this, rather than not employ this person, but should this person go further in the recruitment process based on the level of their English language skills, both written and spoken. So I've been in that process as well. And that's my experience. There is a huge caveat here, irrespective of what I'm about to say. If you have to do a legal English exam for various different reasons, for example, it's part of your university course, or you need to do the English exam to qualify as a solicitor in the United Kingdom if you're not a native, if you're not native to the United Kingdom, or you want to study in the UK or elsewhere, America, or wherever it might be that requires you to do an English exam to prove competence in English, and of course you should do that. That's a no-brainer. You're not going to get very far if you don't do these things, so you have to do them. So that's a caveat, of course. And the last thing I would just say here is that my experience is based entirely on the legal market here in Poland, because this is where I've been working for the last number of years. I would imagine that there's some carryover as regards European countries in general, but outside of European countries, I take this as advice, but I wouldn't say that this, just take this under caution as advice. So it might be useful, it might not be useful. I'll leave this entirely down to you. So with that being said, let's get started. So another bit of background context. The most important point of, the most important legal English doctrine that we have at the moment is the ISO 24495, which is the plain language doctrine. Chapter 2 is the legal communication chapter of that. This is the guiding doctrine which should tell lawyers and people working in the legal professions how they should be communicating with other people. And of course, I'll do another video on this in greater depth. But essentially, it's to say that you as a lawyer, as a communicator, have to put the reader first in terms of communication. So it's not all about thinking about what you can do as a communicator and your skill sets and how wonderful you are in terms of English. You've got to think about how the reader understands and can interact with your communication. So obviously, if you're communicating at this level, but the person that you're talking to only knows English at this level, then it's fair to say that chances are they're not going to understand what you're saying, because what's the point of using all of that high level language if they don't understand it? So this is why it's important to put the reader first. It's about making sure that the reader can, if in terms of specifically about writing, that the reader can find your texts, understand your texts, and then use your texts. If you are thinking about communication from those 3 points of view, then you are thinking about legal communication in the right way. I'll do more videos about that in more detail to unpack that for you. But let's have a look at a background first as regards legal English exams. So, as I showed you, Cambridge, in their suite of exams, once upon a time did the ILEC exam. I think this finished around about 10 years ago. This was the first legal English exam that was commercially available on the market at a wide scale. If I remember correctly, Cambridge pulled the plug on this because essentially it wasn't commercially viable, but it was a legal English exam that followed the format of their other exams. So if you're familiar with the FCE, CAE, CPE exams, then essentially it would follow that kind of format, and you would be tested across the 4 skill sets, and you would have to do that. Only once in the years that I've been working in legal English and internationally, I saw a requirement for a lawyer to actually have the ILEC qualification in order to get the job, or in order to be part of the tender. If I remember correctly, I think this was for over 10 years ago. This was the Romanian government that had this as part of their paperwork, that said, if you want to be part of this tender, you have to be ILEC qualified. I've never seen this for tolls. I've never seen a document as a prerequisite that says we will only engage with you if the lawyers, which are non-native lawyers, are tolls qualified. I've just simply never seen that, just once for ILEC, as I said. Briefly, although I said I'd do another video about this, briefly speaking, there were two types of tolls exams. There were the old suite of tolls exams, and then there are now the new suite of tolls exams. The old tolls exams, particularly the highest level exam, used to test writing. So you would have questions here. For example, there was specifically a drafting question, which was you had to, for example, here, I'm not sure if you're going to see that at all, but essentially what you've got to do, you had a letter here, and then you had to redraft the letter. And there were some quite interesting plain language questions. You had to redraft texts into one form or another. And so that had some utility as regards written legal communication, because you had to then do some redrafting. The new tolls exam is effectively just a vocabulary test now. So it's, do you know the language? Choose the correct answer, write in the correct word. It doesn't really test your ability to communicate. I'll save a detailed analysis of what I'm thinking about the tolls exam for a different time, but essentially to say now, in my opinion, and just remember that this is my opinion, I wouldn't recommend relying on tolls to gain work. As I said, I've been involved in recruitment to a certain extent. It's never something that would convince me that if someone said, I have a tolls exam, during the recruitment process when I'm interviewing them, it essentially is meaningless, because of how you communicate in legal language. You don't communicate using words, you communicate using structures. So from that point of view, I don't see how the exam is that valuable in terms of how you assess someone's communication skills. And so that's a part of the reasons why I'm not a huge fan of the tolls exam. Rather, the mastery of how you communicate in legal English is about how you use complex vocabulary, because in legal English there is complex vocabulary, in structures which are easy to understand. That's the key. That's where the skill in communication is, where you have a complex topic, but you can use simple structures to allow the audience to understand what it is that you're trying to say. It's not about using complex structures just because you can, because as I said, if you can communicate at this level and you're talking to someone who communicates at that level, then your skill sets are essentially useless because communication at that point isn't happening. They're not going to understand you. And yeah, so from that point of view, the old ILEC exam and the old TOLS exams are better than the new TOLS exams now. So if I was in an interview, if someone said to me, I've got the TOLS advanced or whatever it might be, I wouldn't necessarily be persuaded that that's a good thing. I would still go through my own processes to see whether they can communicate in English, either orally or in writing. What are proficiency exams? So that was legal exams. Let's talk about proficiency exams. Proficiency exams, from my point of view, aim to assess you on the complexity of your communication, both in writing and speaking, and how you understand difficult communication, reading and listening. So you've got productive skills, which are checked at a certain level, and your receptive skills, which are checked at a certain level. The problem with proficiency exams is that these skills bear little resemblance to real-world business and don't prepare you for business communication, primarily because no one or very few people speak like that in real life. Okay, when you're going to conferences, when you're networking, when you're sitting in negotiations, very, very few people use proficiency level vocabulary and structures because that's just not normal communication. Normal communication uses, generally speaking, basic structures to communicate quickly, efficiently, and accurately. If I'm using, oh God knows, complicated inversions, for example, then for a start, I might confuse myself, which happens very often in writing because when inversion goes wrong, it really goes wrong. But secondly, you're talking to someone who probably doesn't understand what you're talking about anyhow, or gets confused so quickly that your communication then isn't very effective. So, and also, there's just this general thing where someone is speaking at that proficiency level that it sounds weird. Like, no, as I said, there is this kind of general context that people communicate on an everyday basis. What does it mean on an everyday basis? It means not to communicate at that high level, sophisticated proficiency level. And when someone starts doing that out of place, it just sounds weird. And people then react differently to those people because why are they doing something a little bit weird? So this is the problem with proficiency. Remember, plain English communications is thinking about the reader. Can they understand what it is that you're trying to say? The most gifted communicators in legal English and in the wider Englishes in general are those that can communicate complex things in an easy to understand way. And you can look at through the last decades of the gifted judges and the way that they write their reasonings, that they are writing about complicated things in ways which are easy to understand. On the flip side, those judges who write about their give their reasonings in incredibly complex ways, which are difficult to understand, are rightly criticized for doing so. So I would say that, once again, in my opinion, controversial as it is, there is a strong argument to say that doing proficiency exams may actually harm your ability to communicate in the world of business because you've just done your proficiency exam, you're very proud of your achievement, you're going to use that language, and you do use that language, and then you find out that you can't communicate because they don't interact with you in the way that you expect them to interact because they probably don't, they simply just don't understand you. So should you do one? Well, it depends. If you are a fan of English and you just want to test yourself, by all means, go ahead and do it. But if you think that a proficiency exam will somehow open the door to possibilities or opportunities that might not otherwise exist, I would argue probably not. And certainly if you were going to meet me in the recruitment process, wherever that might be, then it wouldn't be something that would convince me. In actual fact, if you have a proficiency exam, then it would be something that I would focus on to make sure that you can actually communicate normally. So, with all of that being said, do law firms require English language certification? Once again, in my experience and what I've heard anecdotally here on the Polish market and the European market in general, no. There is no requirement, as far as I'm aware, that you can only show your English skills within the area of law with a TOLS exam or with an ILEC exam when it was there. Similarly, because everyone does it, writing proficient in English on your CV is meaningless because everyone does it. You're only going to be tested during the interview process, or if you've been asked to write something, that's when we see your actual ability in English. If you write your language qualifications on your CV, they are noted, but largely ignored, primarily for the same reason that you're tested during the interview process. And then very, very quickly, we can see how you can communicate, at what level you can communicate, what your future potential might be. Is it worth the resources to help you develop your English skills actually on the job? Various different things like that. As I said, as you can see here, in all of the recruitment that I've been involved in, I've never asked for previous qualifications. It takes me personally, completely personally, literally minutes to work out whether you have the spoken language skills required or the written language skills required. I would suspect partners who are involved in law, also involved in the recruitment processes, those in HR and so on, can also tell within a few minutes. So you need to work on your English language skills, but they might not be the ones that you think you need to work on. So, for example, if you're thinking about legal English qualifications, proficiency qualifications, as I said, these are either not helpful or might harm you because, as I said, speaking at that sophisticated level out of context just is a little bit weird. So you've got to get that right, and that means speaking like you would normally speak to people on the street within the interview process in a normal, natural, convincing manner so that you can communicate. Exams cannot prepare you for the crucible of tough negotiations, diplomacy, small talk, chatting in the corridors, that should say. There's a typo there. We go. Should really look at my, let me just add that in there. Chatting in the corridors, relationship building, etc. It's learned on the job. Everyone goes through the process. You work with senior lawyers who have been there, done that. You accompany them on various different meetings, conferences, things like that. You get to know how it works in practice. That's how you learn many English skills. You learn them on the job. English exams, to a certain extent, might be good to get you a certain level. They might help you to understand things a little bit better, but really, your English language skills are going to come on leaps and bounds on the job when you're working with people. What isn't ignored, however, is that, from my point of view, is the legal papers and articles that you've written in English. So writing in English is not necessarily easy. Writing well in English is really not easy. So if you come to an interview, once again, entirely with me, and you present a body of evidence saying, okay, I've written these blog posts, I've written these articles, this is the experience that I have in writing in English, I've been published here, I've got this there, and then I can have a look at that and I can think, oh, okay. Then I can see a number of things straight away. I can see that you're happy writing in English. I can see that your skill set. I can see how well you can communicate. I can see that writing 1,000 words, 1,500 words, 2,000 words isn't going to be a problem for you. And that tells me a lot of good things. So I would say, out of all of the things that you could come to that would impress me in an interview, would be fluency in communication and a body of evidence that shows that you are comfortable writing in English. So how should you prepare? In a general sense, from my point of view, once again, in terms of speaking, because in the interview there's going to be speaking, fluency is better than accuracy. There's a modern approach in how we teach English, which is BELF, which is business English as a lingua franca. Effectively, that means that the focus is put on fluency, not accuracy. So you can make mistakes. But as long as the fluency is there and as long as you can communicate your message, that is the key thing. Now, of course, people are there are pros and cons to that argument, and for good reason. But in my experience in the last number of years where I've worked both in Poland and internationally with various different people in various different industries, I can say that right now, if you've got someone who is making mistakes but is more fluent than someone who doesn't make mistakes but can't speak that well, then the fluency is always going to be better in terms of communication. You can forgive mistakes. Don't worry about the mistakes. It's whether how you are understood and how effective you are at communicating whatever it is that you're hoping to communicate, bearing in mind, of course, that you're always trying to make sure that your interlocutor understands what it is that you're trying to say. Speed and tempo about how you communicate is important, or I say may be important. I'll do a different video on that because I don't want to make this video too long. In terms of writing, if you want to improve your writing skills, then focus on plain language writing techniques. Check out my channel. I've got a 50 lesson course available free of charge on my channel. It will take you through the most important things step by step. Get comfortable writing 2-3 pages because obviously within law you're writing a lot. So in your proficiency exams, you might just be conditioned to write 400 words or 500 words. Within the area of law, you should be comfortable writing at least 2,000 words without any problems. Get good at planning and editing. I've done lots of videos on this on that course that I was talking about, and I will do so in the future, are key to writing a good document. Plan it properly and then develop really good editing skills, knowing what you're looking for in order to make sure that that finished copy is as good as it can possibly be, bearing in mind your audience to who you're writing to. Get some evidence of writing in English, as I said, and in the interview, what would persuade me in the interview process? If you show me articles you've written, if you show me blogs you've written, if you show me any body of text that you've written, that will persuade me. Get good at conversational English, because this is what happens a lot in legal English. It's not just hardcore legal terms. It's a human interaction, which means that you interact with humans on a normal level. And one of the criticisms about people whose English is not their mother tongue when they come into a law firm is that they are very technical, but they are not, I would say, effective normal communicators. So, and this is something that I meet on a fairly regular basis. You've got someone who can talk about mergers and acquisitions. You can talk someone talking about intellectual property. You've got someone who can talk about whatever it might be. But ask them, for example, what they did on holiday last year, and it all falls apart. So just work on conversational English, small talk, which will help you no end in terms of the small talk that you need at conferences, the networking skills that you need, and so on. Conclusions. So the question is, will proficiency English exams or TOEFLs, the commercially available legal English exam, help you to get a legal job or be a good writer? In my opinion, proficiency exams won't help you to get a job or be a writer, and they can actually work against you because there's a focus on developing your communication skills at a level that people can't generally communicate at. So you've got to question the sense of that. However, I would say this, exams at C1 level, so this is advanced, not proficiency, proficiency is C2, that's where you should be aiming. That should be the target. B2 at an absolute minimum. C1, that is, I would say, the sweet spot. So that's where I would go. I wouldn't necessarily think about doing C2. In terms of your CVs, excellent English is a given. It's just almost unnecessary writing. As I said, writing proficiency in English isn't going to convince me but because everyone does it, writing your exams might help you. So from that point of view, if you're thinking, will a CV get you through the front door to the interview stage, then I guess there's an argument to say that it might be useful, but not necessarily be that much of that much of an influential factor. Evidence your writing, because as lawyers we do lots of writing, so if you can evidence that you've done writing, that's a good thing. Work on fluency in speaking, as I said, BELF, business English as a lingua franca. This is where normal communicative English happens within the professional environment. So get good about talking various different things, or get as fluent as you can, rather, I'd say, talking about various different things. And in part of that, you should be developing all areas of vocabulary, not just legal English. All right. Lots of information in that presentation. I'll do a lot more videos about that in the future, about the very specific points. I think there's a lot more things to say. Just remember that this is all, of course, my opinion as a practitioner here in Poland, involved in this area for a number of years. Take it as you wish. Take it with a pinch of salt if you wish. If you've got any comments, if you agree with me, disagree with me, chuck them in, put them underneath the video. I'm happy to engage in the debate, do more videos about this. If you want to know anything more about my experiences involved in this field, then please leave a comment below and I will do my best to develop the conversation.